smart enough to win. That's how the story starts. Learning is the edge that sets your work apart. When the stakes get high and the pressure never stops, smart learning in your pocket puts your business at the top.
Welcome to the Learning Advantage, from insight to impact, where we're going to show how smart learning fuels real business results. I'm Deb Laurel, and I'm your host. So I welcome you today. For over 40 years, Laurel and Associates Limited has worked alongside national and international managers to help them successfully manage employees and create and maintain a positive, supportive, and healthy environment where employees want to stay and do their best. We focus on making lackluster leaders legendary. The purpose of the Learning Advantage, from insight to impact, is to discuss how smart learning fuels real business results. In each episode, we strive to deliver actionable strategies, evidence-based design tips, and real-world case studies that show how learning strengthens organizational health, advances sustainability, and drives profitability. For that reason, I'm delighted to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Sharalyn Payne. Your organization is either collecting a return on the power entrusted to its leaders or absorbing the cost of its absence. Most organizations never stop to calculate which is true. That calculation is exactly where Dr. Sharalyn Payne begins. She works with healthcare systems, financial institutions, government agencies, and technology organizations facing a specific problem: people in positions of power who hold titles but aren't producing returns. Not underperformers in the traditional sense, but those whose presence isn't multiplying the people, culture, or results around them. Organizations feel it. They just don't always have language for it. Dr. Payne gives them the language, and then she gives them a standard. The creator of the Return on Power framework and the author of 2 leadership books, Dr. Payne equips senior leaders and executive teams to measure what power is actually producing and to hold themselves and others accountable to the standard they accepted when they took the title. Her keynotes and advisory engagements don't motivate leaders to do better. They hold leaders accountable for what their leadership is actually producing. She serves as secretary of the NSA North Texas chapter and hosts The Game Changer with Dr. Sharalyn, a podcast for leaders who understand that influence without accountability is liability. When your organization is done tolerating the cost of power that looks the part but doesn't pay the return, Dr. Payne is the call you make. So welcome, Dr. Sharalyn.
Thank you, Deb. I am absolutely delighted to be here with you today. I love the introduction, but more than that, I just like hearing about what you've done and how you've been able to help leaders to become legendary. It's an honor.
Well, it's an honor to have you. So I'm going to get right into the questions.
Absolutely. Let's go.
When you think about learning as a competitive advantage, what does that mean in the context of your organization or your work?
That's a great question. It's essential that we learn and we grow from what we have actually experienced or what we've seen. And the best leaders know how to do just that. You take more than just the information that you're reading, right? But you begin to apply it. You're testing it. You're seeing if it works and where do you actually need to tweak and what you can actually do better. So often we have leaders who are conditioned to grow, or they're so busy that they don't make the time to learn and grow. But the best organizations, they take that information, best leaders actually, they take that information, whether it's a listening survey, whether it's feedback from their team, whether it's something they're reading or a conversation they had, and they're using that information to become more competitive. I was talking to a leader yesterday, and she said that she went to see The Devil Wears Prada because her team calls her that all the time. They refer to her as Miranda. And so she went to see this movie, and she went with some of her mentees. But I love that she said, and now we have a debrief this next weekend to talk about what were the key takeaways from the movie. What did we actually learn? How can we apply it in our organizations? That's the key, right? You can learn from whatever you're doing. You know, if you are out in nature observing, if you're reading a book, like I said, if you're, watching a movie, how do you take that information and use it to move you and your organization to the next level?
Can you share a specific example where a learning initiative moved from insight to real impact and how you measured that impact?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've done for years with organizations, it's the listening surveys and making it a point to not just ask people for their feedback, for their insights, but how do we take that information and we actually operationalize what were the key findings? This is the data. This is what the data actually represented. So for example, for one organization I'm thinking of in particular, they had a very toxic work culture. People didn't like the leaders. They were not being paid well. So there were issues with compensation. They felt like they were not being recognized for the great work that they did. But the organization had a lofty goal. And that lofty goal was they wanted to become a great place to work. Well, how do we take the information from the survey results, the data that's here, and where can we begin to apply those key learnings throughout the leadership team, holding leaders accountable for driving those results in those behaviors? And so it required us to, dissect the data, right? To get deep into that data, to have the tough conversations with leaders. Here's what your team is saying. And of course, we have leaders who discount what the results say. That's not it. They didn't understand the questions. No, we're just going through a time. We can make 1,000 excuses, but the bottom line is I'm looking at the trends. And it's not just your team. This is historically what the organization is saying and where you compare to other organizations of your size and in your industry, and began to put together a playbook and a plan. These are the 3 things that we're going to do day in, day out. People underestimate the power of listening and consistency and being very intentional in the work that you do. And what we saw is the organization's engagement began to go up. But we also found with the change in leadership and we lost that focus, the results began to trend down. That's the importance of taking the information and learning from it and not discounting what people are actually saying, being willing to go into that meeting and say, this is what you said, tell me more, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Now hold me accountable, and I'm going to come back next month and you should see some progress. I'm going to come back 2 months from now and you should see more progress. I'm going to come back another month from now, 3 months, and you should see progress. And guess what? It should be sustainable and reflected in next year's employee engagement survey. That's the way that we drive change. But again, it starts with the leaders not discounting that information, setting aside your ego and taking this information. What can we learn? Perhaps we can learn that we don't have the right programs. Then no matter how great you think your organization is. I'm reminded of one in particular where they took away the rewards and recognition program. And when they dissolve that recognition program, it's nothing for the organization, right? Sometimes the leaders forget you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're living probably a different lifestyle than a lot of the people who are within your organization on your team. And so something, as I share with them, it's $100 is nothing to you, but it's everything to them. $5 is nothing to you, but it's everything to them. Let's go back and look at our organization. Let's look at our metrics and our drivers and see how us moving this, is it correlating with something else over here? That's how we began to see that what you do, your behaviors, they actually matter. You may think, oh, this is nothing. They're not going to miss it. They're not going to talk about it. But they do. And people begin to talk, and then it impacts, how they view you as a leader. It impacts how they contribute to you as a leader. Believe it or not, the employees are helping the leaders to be successful. I don't know why leaders don't get that. Sometimes they don't really understand that. We understand the lackluster leaders, right? May not really understand that concept that if I'm working for DAP and how DAP supports me, how DAP helps me to grow, how DAP listens to me, how DAP allows me to share my voice and my opinions, that has a direct correlation with how hard I'm going to work sometimes. If it's not embedded within me, the best ideas, will I contribute to DAP? Will I ensure that DAP understands that, hey, if you do this, then this could, trickle, hit this particular domino, and then we see a landslide here. We may not want to go in that direction, but here's another recommendation for you, DAP. And so I think that matters, right? When we take that information, we're able to learn from it. We're able to operationalize it. And that's just one way that I've seen organizations begin to turn around and begin to be a place where people actually want to work and the engagement is going up. But it starts with listening and learning.
It does. I want to mention on May 20th, I'm working with Ethan Sanders, and we're doing a program that looks at how you use the data from the engagement survey to identify who are those managers who are most engaging, and then through listening and interviewing them, identifying what are the specific things that those managers do so that we can replicate that throughout the organization.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you see as the biggest barrier preventing organizations from fully embracing lifelong learning, and how do you think we can overcome it?
Oh, that's a good one. Wow. I'm going to say what I found, and it's not true for all organizations, but it's really, sad, is that when the budget is tight, then we see learning disappears. And we don't necessarily invest in growth and development in the things that can really move the organization forward and fast track its success. It's, we don't need training. We'll have our leaders training. We'll have our managers training. They're not really equipped sometimes to train. Sometimes they are, right? But training is making sure that behavior changes, that something takes place where there is a shift, not just you giving information. And so I see that we began to, dismantle the learning organization. We dismantle those opportunities for people to learn, or we, do what I see a lot of organizations doing now. Yes, we're providing training for our people, but the training is all focused on AI only right now, right? And so it's more that we need to be successful in an organization than simply AI. That's a tool and it's a resource. And yes, we need to know how to create prompts and be responsible with AI. But there are other things that are going by the wayside. How do you lead the generations in the workplace? How do you ensure that you are creating a culture of psychological safety within the workplace? How do you ensure that your leaders are aware of the behaviors and the drivers that it takes to create and sustain a high performing team? How do you develop your successors or your top talent? Development is something that people are desiring. When you're looking at the research, it shows it's one of the reasons why people go to organizations and they stay at those organizations. So it's not a nice to have, it's actually a must have. And without some of those soft skills that, you and I probably had when we were, in the workplace, where we understood the importance of it, also how you do it, how you get it done, how you communicate and engage with your colleagues, then that can be challenging, especially as we're living in a virtual world and a hybrid world. But the barrier is understanding that we must continue to invest in our people and our leaders and ensure that they have the tools and the resources to be successful. We see some organizations, I love when they say, oh, well, we do DISC. Well, if you have 50 people on the team, are you really applying DISC, on a consistent basis? I don't, sometimes we have the meetings stacked up so that I don't have time to see, okay, is Deborah an I or is she a C when I go into this meeting? Okay, then Chris, is he an a I or is he a D? So we don't really, take the information, all of these tools that we have, but not necessarily knowing how to apply them and when they're best utilized. And so we either give too much, we don't have the right tools, or like I said, what I see more often than not, when the budget is tight, when things are critical, then we're going to cut the budget for training and development. We're going to cut the people who actually do training and development and think that, we'll pick it back up later, not understanding that we are really impacting our organizations.
Terribly, terribly. Yes.
Yes.
And there are so many people who leave organizations when they don't have that training opportunity.
Yes. I'll tell you a funny story, not to interrupt you. I remember working for a leader years ago, and I was a high performer. And I was responsible for doing a lot of culture transformation work at the organization. I remember asking the leader for a $50 subscription to a magazine that was directly correlated to the work that I did. $50. And she said, nope, we can't afford it. And I'm thinking to myself, you make $500,000 a year without your bonus. $500,000 a year. You wouldn't invest $50 to get the best insights for an organization that you are new to and you don't really understand this culture. And I'm sharing with you how this works. $50, $4 a month, essentially, $4 and a quarter. And it baffled me, but it wasn't too long after that where they exited her from that organization. Those are the type of things that people don't even realize. And I'm not saying those two things were directly correlated, but I'm just saying the decisions that you make as a leader, you have to begin to think about who's on my team and how are they contributing and what do they need to help me and the organization be successful consistently. And I'm viewed as a true player in this organization with something to offer, of value. I'm providing new insights. I'm providing new ways of working, new ways of doing things. We're innovative. Even when it's outside of my function, I have something to contribute to my peers.
Amen.
I'm talking to the choir because we've had conversations before and they were absolutely enlightening. And I know that you get it.
All right. What, in your view, is one outdated belief about corporate learning that we need to let go of, and what should replace it?
Oh, that's good. An outdated belief about corporate learning and that we should replace it. I'm going to say that only top talent gets development. I think that's so outdated that we only invest in top talent, and for a number of reasons, right? Because as I tell people when they are coming to me and they're crying and upset and they said, I'm not top talent. Well, ask them, what is top talent? What are they doing for top talent? But how do you become top talent? So I think number one, when we put the labels on people, then we isolate another group, right? And it's really kind of subjective unless we have an objective way to really measure that this person is truly top talent and they have the critical skills that we need to move the organization forward, and we're putting them in buckets. So that's one thing is, by labeling people, it's great to know who your high performers are. But reality is our average performers keep the organization going as well. And so we forget about those people that we are deciding that they are really, I'm going to say, worthless and not really worth our time of investing in, and perhaps with a different leader. And I've seen it where people were labeled as low performers or average performers. And that was the furthest thing from the truth. The leader was intimidated by that particular person and put the label on that person. They got with another team or another leader. And then all of a sudden they become like the shining star that somebody found and dusted off. No, it's been there all along. The leader was intimidated there. So I'm going to say that only investing in the top talent, and we call them the high performers, high investment group, right? The investment in growth group rather. And so we have this group and we say, this is where we're going to throw all of our resources, all of our faith behind these people, these critical few people, and they are the elite of the organization. And then you get to go to a Skillsoft course, or you get to go to, the AI adoption course. But we're not really investing in you, not understanding that where you are is not where you've always been. There are plenty of people, and we teach people to not look at their career as a ladder, but to look at it as a matrix. But we don't invest in them that way. And so the outdated belief is that we're only investing in our executive leadership team or our directors and above, or we're only investing in top talent. And then these other individuals, we're not investing in them. But then we have the, I like to call the revolving doors, and we're continuously spending money and losing money and revenue trying to get these other people up to date. And core, when we just need to really kind of look at what can we really invest in every person in our organization. If we understood that our leaders are here to teach, grow, and get a return on power, then you are going to be held to, are you investing in Deb? How are you helping Deb grow? How is Deb better because of your leadership? What is she doing even in the community that's connecting back to this particular organization? How is she fundamentally different and adding more value, no matter where she is in the organization, to helping our organization thrive? And if we look at like people as they are truly resources and they are worth the investment, then I think that we would begin to select better. We would begin to be more intentional with our meetings instead of coming to meetings and we do the round robin because we've not prepared. Well, Deb, what are you working on today? Well, Sue, what are you working on today? Well, John, what are you working on? Instead of who can we bring to the meeting to add value? How can Deb contribute to this meeting? Deb, I would love for you to be able to teach us on XYZ. I know that you're doing this. And so why don't you teach us this? Or, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to bring this to our organization next week. And then I want us to have questions that we can ask Deb. We want to challenge Deb, not in a way to dehumanize her or to demoralize her, but we want Deb to continue to grow and we want to grow as well. So what thought-provoking questions can we ask Deb about this particular topic to help us to be able to, again, be our best selves? And I think if we are more intentional, it doesn't have to always be a big, huge budget, right? But it could be simply, we're going to read this book. I don't know. I just have a book here, Improv Wisdom. Maybe we're going to read Improv Wisdom and we're going to learn how in our meetings we present ourselves better, how we are more engaging, right? Something as simple as that. But how do you ensure that when people leave your organization, they are growing? When they think about you as a leader, they are growing. And it's not just for the people who we deem to be the elite in the organizations, and we're creating the society of us versus them while we're talking about we want this particular culture. It just doesn't happen with that intention.
On a totally different topic, how are you leveraging data, technology, or new learning initiatives and methods to create more personalized and effective learning experiences?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, one of the things that I love a good assessment or index, a good assessment and index, because research is everything to me. And it can start with something as simple as asking people, who are you? What do you want? Where do you want to grow? And then also being able to create teams within organizations, being able to take that data and create different teams. Okay, this team likes innovation and this team likes this and this particular team likes this. But using that data to be able to go back to the leaders and make a recommendation. Hey, we have this particular problem and I've seen this work really well. I'm thinking about one rising star doing this same thing. We were able to, with an engineering team, we were able to solve a problem that had been plaguing the organization for years. And they thought they were going to have to exit a particular region and market because they didn't have anyone, and they had searched internally and externally to be able to help them with this particular equipment and solving it. But just putting together that survey, sending it out to the organization, and then beginning to put people in buckets and giving them the opportunity. Here's what we have that you can work on. We got these particular 5 different areas that's facing the organization now. Does one appeal to you? Can you get your leader support to be able to engage in this particular team? And what I found for this particular team that I'm talking about right now, this person that's just a rock star, he saved the organization. I mean, the CEO, and this was a large Fortune 500 organization and manufacturing company. And the CEO just could not believe that something as simple as that, using the data of what are people interested in, who are they, what's in their background, what have they done before, that they're not getting the opportunity to work on engaging projects now, right? Because you're hired to do something specific. But how can we use that and make space for it and create teams and get buy-in where that saved the organization's market? And we had a big goal. We wanted to be number 1 or number 2 in every single market in which we competed. Now that was across 57 countries, but 3 different markets. And so being able to have that goal with the new CEO, and again, it had been plaguing them for years. I mean, we had all the big wigs were involved in this one little survey, one little new team, and one new hire to the organization, giving them the opportunity to do that. And it changed everything. And even for him, I mean, of course, he quickly moved up in the organization after that and was able to talk to it. But what was interesting even about that is that the organization had been focused on, we only wanted to recruit from certain type of schools. And we only want to recruit from these elite universities. And being able to go and use data and say, no, I have a hypothesis here. Just go with me as an experiment. And if we were to begin to look at other schools that are outside of where we are recruiting now, could we get different talent? And they really weren't interested in different talent. But I rolled the, dice anyway, and, recruited this person, brought him in, and it wasn't my job to recruit. I was just over a leadership program. And with that, saw that those individuals who came in, they did some incredible things for the organization. They're still there, many of them years later. And so that's the power of knowing your tools, right? Knowing what is it that what is it that you're hoping to get from the tool that you're using? How are you using that technology? Bad data in is bad data out. And so you've got to ask the right questions. You've got to have the right tools and be able to use that data to tell a story that's impactful to the organization and the leaders that are there. Because it doesn't matter, right? If it's something that's interesting to me, Sharalyn, they could care less. But, they want to know, how are we using these tools to be able to move the organization forward? And what are we doing with the data?
Data is so important. And I think organizations have a lot of data that they don't look at all. They don't use it.
They do not. They love collecting the data, though. They will collect the data and collect, exit surveys. But what do you do with the exit survey? You have the data there. You're paying for the solution. But how are you using that to be able to tell the story and get the support that's needed?
If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to build a true culture of continuous learning, what would it be?
Let me think about that. If they want to build a culture of continuous learning, what would it be? I personally like staying in integrity. And for me, that's you need to continuously be growing and learning yourself. And so what are you doing to make time in your calendar every single day to grow, to read, to learn, to apply, without asking your team? That they should be able to look and see that you are growing. And then you're recommending tools and bringing tools and resources and people and books to them, that they know that you have embedded this as part of your team meetings. You've embedded this in your one-on-one. And so again, you're very intentional. You're not just asking them. I've had leaders to say, okay, well, we want everybody to read this book. And then they turn around and say, I don't like to read, or I didn't read the book. It's like, and so they have everybody, they buy the book or have everyone to go and get the book, but we never discuss the book. We never apply the principles from the book. And so I think you should be growing as a leader every single day. You need to do two things. Number one, I think blocking out your calendar to make sure that you are reading, you're listening to. I personally still like, I'm old school, so I still believe I have books right here in the books in your hand. So I like a hard book, but if you don't like that, then make, when you're on your daily walk or your run or your drive, that you are listening to something productive, something that can grow you. And you're talking about what you've learned with your team. But guess what else? You go a step further and you ask them about it. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that? Have a discussion and a dialogue about it. Put together some groups, if you can. Again, put it in as part of your team meeting, your one-on-ones with people, so they can see that you're really serious about this. And you ask them to hold you accountable to what it is that you've committed to doing as a result of how you've grown with this information. That's what I think the great leaders do, and what I recommend. And then blocking out time to think, don't just take the information in and absorb it, but actually think and reflect about what it means to you and how you can actually apply it, and do those two things every single day.
I love your example about the leader taking mentees to the Devil Wears Prada, and having people really think about what it means.
Yes.
And what they take from that.
Yeah. What did you get from it?
What's one book, resource, or learning experience that has a lasting impact on you personally?
One book or resource. Let's see. I read all the time that has a lasting impact on me personally. That's a good question. I think anything by Brian Tracy. He's one of my favorites. And so I love Brian Tracy, and not just for the sales, aspect of it, but the leadership as well, the high performance mindset. And so that's one, just thinking about, again, what do great leaders do? Great people, successful people do differently than other people. I'm always looking to get that, not necessarily that edge on someone else, but to become better myself every single day, and understand that my habits, which helps me because I'm a creative. So it can be very easy for me to kind of wander, right? But my habits, what I'm doing day in, day out, is the key to my success. And then my other favorite that I listen to him regularly, probably need to listen to him every single day, but I don't. Jim Rohn. I love Jim Rohn. I love Napoleon Hill, the old school people. So those are my favorite. As far as leadership, I absolutely love, I'm a Patrick Lencioni fan. And so I love the idea of, you said one, of course, as you can see, but I love The Motive. That's one of my favorite books, is The Motive, I really like that. So that's another another book rather. And then a resource, Communicate to Influence. I went to that course years ago, and it was impactful to be able to see yourself and how you think you're communicating versus what other people hear, and how can you make your messages stronger and land better. I think that's especially important as a leader, especially people who are in the C-suite, or they have to do town halls or lead large teams. Being able to communicate concisely, to be able to move the room, to be able to tell a story, to engage people in the conversation with you. Even if you have a room full of, thousands of people, how do you make it feel like it's just one person? And so not rambling, and being able to, people can walk away and they understand what their next steps are and what they are to do. And so I love that Communicate to Influence, because clarity is key. And so often we're like, okay, what did she say? Or what did he say? So that's another resource that I would advise anyone to be able to apply that, to go to that course if they can, and just see how do you do.
Is there anything that you'd like to add that I haven't asked about?
Anything that I like to add that you haven't asked about? I would love to know what you recommend are as a great tool or resource for people. One other just came to mind for me, but I would love to see if that's one that you would actually recommend, even for people who are not leaders in the organization, just the average everyday person. If you had to give them, I'm going to go three tools or three resources. What would you share?
Well, one, Lynn Bothwell's The Art of Leadership
Okay.
was very impactful on me because it's has wonderful stories, has great insight, has good assessments,
Okay.
has case studies, and has good activities. And as a trainer, that's really important to me. Growing Together, and it's two brothers, and I can't think of their name, but that also wonderful activities, leadership activities to help people recognize how important it is to collaborate, to communicate, to work with people through change. And the third one, it's going to be a little bit out of the beaten path, but it's The New Assertive Woman.
Huh. Okay.
Was what started me in doing training 100 years ago. So those three books.
Okay, I'm going to have to research them and look those up because I've not heard of those three. So those are three new ones to me. So I'm glad you shared that so I can add to my library.
Well,
Let me ask you another. What do you think about Toastmasters?
I have never gone to Toastmasters, but I have seen the results of people going to Toastmasters. I was working with a woman in an organization, and we had a charitable drive. And she was going to be speaking about how a certain charity had helped her mother.
Okay.
And this was a woman who was very shy, very soft-spoken. And I was really worried about her. But she had gone to Toastmasters where they had practiced and she had practiced and she had practiced. And boy, she knocked the socks off people.
Wow.
So I was very taken with
Wow.
that. How do you feel about Toastmasters?
Same thing. I've seen it really be transformative for people and leaders, especially maybe those who, like you said, who are shy, or those who are English is not necessarily their first language, or those who just want to become a better, stronger speaker, because they have groups, of course, of all different sizes and types. And so I've seen some great results from Toastmasters when it's been done well. And so that's a resource. When you mentioned that after I talked, that would be something that I would also recommend that people get into the habit of speaking, just because in an organization, especially in training, as you're talking about training and learning, you're learning how to lead, you're learning how to speak, how to communicate, how to give feedback. It's so many different things that's happening there with that one resource, and it's nominal. It's a nominal way to grow. And if you're in a Toastmasters group where they're reading books and sharing resources as well, you're networking. It's so many benefits that I didn't even think about right then that when you asked that, but that's a phenomenal resource that I would advise for people to get involved with.
And it's not just for people who are shy and who are uncomfortable speaking. I know of many speakers who continually polish their presentations with the feedback and the opportunities to practice with Toastmasters.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely second that recommendation. Well, thank you so much. This has been just a pleasure having you. And I'm so glad that you were able to do this. How can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. They can go to ultrainfluential.com, which is my website, and I have my Substack newsletter there as well for your guests, but ultrainfluential.com.
Okay. I want to thank our listeners for listening and participating in our conversation. I hope that you learned as much from this session as I did. I'd like you to join us next week on May 19th as we meet with Sandra K. Connor, the creative force and founder of Video Grows, a marketing strategy and video production firm serving B2B companies in intangible service industries. And I would like to offer, for those of you who are wondering how your leaders are doing, to contact me, because I have a two-part assessment. We've been talking about data, an assessment that will help you identify where the areas are that are strong and the areas where they need to grow. So thank you again for joining us. And Dr. Sharalyn, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Learning Advantage from Insight to Impact. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Every lesson, every workshop, every failed attempt you save becomes a map upon the desktop. Shows the